For decades, every Platonic dialogue revolved around one man, Socrates, questioning, prodding, leading every argument forward. Then, in two late works, Socrates simply stops talking. He sits in the room. But a stranger with no name speaks for philosophy itself. Why would Plato sideline his own greatest character? The answer reveals the moment Plato finally stepped out from behind his master. To understand why Socrates went quiet, we first need to know when Plato wrote these works. The Sophist and the Statesman are late dialogues composed shortly before the Laws when Plato was at least 70 years old. Place them against his career and a pattern emerges. As the decades pass, the towering figure of Socrates slowly shrinks from the center of the stage. Consider how strange this is. For a lifetime, Plato made Socrates the relentless engine of inquiry. Every dialogue bent around his voice. Then, in the Sophist and Statesman, the philosophical heavy lifting passes entirely to an unnamed Eleatic Stranger. Socrates introduces him, then falls silent for the rest of the conversation. This is not a small staging choice. It is a deliberate signal that Plato is moving onto new ground. The stranger is a mask. Writing in his 70s, Plato no longer needs Socrates to voice his thoughts. He wants to articulate positions that are not strictly Socratic, ideas his teacher never explored. So he invents a stand-in, a fresh philosophical voice. Through this figure, Plato develops his mature thinking in a new key, speaking at last, almost in his own person. But why this particular replacement? Why an Eleatic stranger? Eleatic means the school of Parmenides, the great thinker of the city of Elea. Parmenides argued that reality is one single, unchanging whole. By choosing a man from his school, Plato announces his own lineage. He presents himself as heir to Parmenides, inheriting that powerful drive toward logical unity. The choice is not random, it is a declaration of philosophical ancestry. Here lies the crucial qualification. Plato refuses to follow Parmenides all the way. The strict Eleatic logic carries a hidden danger. If reality is purely one, then what is not cannot exist, and if it cannot exist, it cannot be spoken. Negation becomes impossible, and without negation, meaningful speech collapses entirely. You could no longer say what something is not. Plato saw this trap clearly, and he stepped around it. So Plato keeps what is useful and discards what is fatal. Parmenides seeks logical unity by dissolving all plurality, and his strict logic makes what is not unsayable. Plato seeks unity within diversity, a oneness that survives plurality rather than erasing it. He preserves difference and with it, meaningful speech. The drive toward unity remains, but now it makes room for the many. That is the philosophy the stranger carries. One warning before we go further. This is not Plato rejecting Socrates. The stranger is an evolution beyond him, not a repudiation of him. Notice that Plato keeps Socrates physically present in the room, a deliberate gesture of continuity. The teacher has not been thrown out. He simply yields the floor while the argument travels into territory he never charted. And there's one final clue hidden in what Plato planned but never finished. The Sophist and the Statesman were the first two parts of a trilogy. Each hunts down a definition. First the false imitator, then the true ruler. The third dialogue would complete the set, the Philosopher. It was promised, but Plato never wrote it. And here is the key point. Scholars believe it was not lost. A lost work leaves traces in the records. This one leaves nothing. It was abandoned. So the absence becomes the message. Plato defined the Sophist, he defined the Statesman. Then he stopped and never gave us his portrait of the Philosopher. Perhaps the Philosopher cannot be pinned down the way the others were, captured in a tidy definition. Or perhaps Plato felt no need to write that third dialogue, because the Philosopher was already standing before us, speaking the whole time. The nameless Eleatic stranger, the mask through which Plato finally spoke in his own voice. The missing dialogue is a question Plato left open. Sit with it.